Section 1. Your phone buzzes while you're in line at the grocery store, card reader waiting, and cashier already looking up. You open the alert and see a balance that's lower than you expected. Your chest tightens, your face warms, and you start doing mental math like you're trying to outrun a wave. What if the scariest part isn't the number, but the way your body treats that number like a threat? What if money anxiety is less about money and more about a reflex that fires before you've had a chance to think? For a lot of people, every bill, notification, or bank login feels like stepping onto thin ice. 1 minute you're fine, the next you're scanning your account like it's a crime scene, searching for what went wrong. You tell yourself you'll handle it tomorrow, then tomorrow arrives with more emails, more expenses, and more pressure. At work, it turns into distraction and irritability. You reread the same message 3 times, you start a task and stall out, you avoid a meeting because you can't focus, and you feel guilty even when you're trying your best. At home, it leaks into relationships. You're shorter than you want to be. You go quiet when someone asks a normal question like, "Did the rent clear?" You get defensive, or you over-explain, or you change the subject. You might avoid opening texts because you're worried the next one will be about shared expenses, a late fee, or that awkward "Hey, can you send your half" message. And when you finally get into bed, your body is tired but your mind is still calculating. You replay bills. You imagine worst-case outcomes. You promise yourself you'll wake up early and fix everything, then you wake up already tense, already behind. If nothing changes, the stakes are real. You keep losing sleep. You keep making rushed decisions just to get relief. You keep avoiding what needs to be handled, which makes the problem grow. And slowly, you start carrying a belief that you can't be trusted with your own life, even when the truth is simpler. You're stuck in a stress loop that you were never taught how to interrupt. Here's what you're getting today. You'll learn how to calm your body before you touch anything financial, so you stop making decisions from panic. You'll learn how to look at debt, bills, and plans with a clearer head instead of avoiding everything. And you'll learn how to replace shame with a steadier sense of agency, so your financial reality becomes a set of problems you can face, not a verdict on your worth. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's get specific, because accurate naming is the first step toward control. Money anxiety usually isn't a clean, logical worry. It's a body alarm that fires before your thinking mind even sits down at the table. Your breathing gets shallow. Your shoulders lift. Your stomach drops. Your thoughts speed up, but they don't get wiser. They get louder. In that state, you don't calmly evaluate options, you try to escape the feeling. You want relief, and you want it fast. That's why you might do things that don't match your values. You might pay a bill immediately without checking the due date, just to make the pressure stop. You might move money between accounts like shuffling papers on a desk, hoping the anxiety quiets down. You might refresh the bank app 10 times in an hour, thinking the number will change if you stare at it hard enough. Or you might go the opposite direction and avoid it completely, because you've learned that looking equals pain. Either way, the anxiety is steering, and you're just trying to survive the moment. The Stoics were blunt about this. In the Enchiridion, Epictetus argues that what disturbs us isn't the event itself, but the judgment we attach to it. A balance is a balance. A bill is a bill. The suffering starts when your mind adds, "This means I'm trapped," or "This means I'll never catch up," or "This means I'm failing," and your body believes that judgment as if danger is happening right now. Once your system believes it, your choices narrow. You stop thinking in options and start thinking in exits. Fix it now, hide from it, distract yourself, or lash out at the nearest person. So the goal today is not to force optimism or pretend everything is fine. The goal is to build a pause you can trust. A pause that gives your body a chance to settle before you decide, text, pay, ignore, or snap. Because the first 10 seconds after a trigger are where most of the damage happens. Not because you're careless, but because you're flooded. When you're flooded, you choose relief over results. You choose speed over clarity. You choose whatever quiets the feeling, even if it costs you later. And there's another piece we have to say out loud: shame makes this worse. Shame whispers that you're behind because you're flawed. Shame makes you hide. Shame makes you procrastinate. Shame makes you over-explain, overwork, or overspend just to feel normal for a moment. Shame also makes you isolated because you don't want anyone to see that you're stressed. But shame doesn't pay bills. Shame doesn't create plans. It just drains your energy and makes the situation feel heavier than it is. If you've been carrying that weight, hear this clearly: you're not weak for having a strong reaction to money. Money touches survival, status, freedom, family, and future. Of course your body reacts. The question is whether you let that reaction run the whole day, or whether you train a calmer response that protects your focus and your relationships. Here's the journey we're taking, and it's practical. First, we're going to calm your body before you make any money decisions, so your nervous system stops calling the shots. Next, we're going to break the reflex of instant response, because reacting quickly feels responsible but often produces mistakes and regret. Then, we'll practice a clean way to create space between the trigger and your next move, so you can choose a response that helps tomorrow instead of harming it. After that, we'll work on how to face uncomfortable numbers without collapsing into avoidance or self-attack. Finally, we'll put it all under pressure in a real situation so you can feel what it's like to stay steady when your old spiral tries to take over. Before we move on, check your own pattern. When a money notification hits, what's your first impulse? To check again? To fix it immediately? To text someone for reassurance? To close the app and pretend it didn't happen? Most people think the problem starts when they see the number. But the real start is earlier. It's the instant your body tightens and your mind starts predicting disaster. That hinge moment is where you can build a new response. Here's a reframe to carry with you: money anxiety is not a command. It's information, sometimes useful, often distorted. It's your system saying, pay attention. But you decide how, when, and with what tone you pay attention. Calm doesn't mean you don't care. Calm means you care enough to think clearly. In a bit, we're going to walk through a Friday night moment where you're exhausted, you're trying to relax, and one notification threatens to hijack your whole evening. You'll see exactly where the old reaction almost takes over, and how one pause and one sentence keep you from spiraling, snapping at someone you care about, or making a money decision you regret in the morning. Section 2. When money anxiety hits, the first rule is simple: don't touch the decision until you calm your body. Not the payment. Not the text reply. Not the let me just check real quick bank login. Because the moment you act while your nervous system is lit up, you're not choosing, you're escaping. And escape moves feel productive in the moment, but they quietly create tomorrow's mess. If you never change this, the cost is predictable. You'll keep making rushed choices that you later second guess. You'll keep paying things out of fear instead of planning. You'll keep sending reactive messages that create tension with people you live with, date, co-parent with, or work with. You'll keep avoiding the numbers until they become bigger and scarier. And you'll keep living with that background hum of dread that steals your focus even when you're trying to enjoy a normal day. This works for a very practical reason. Your body sets the ceiling for your thinking. When your system senses threat, your brain narrows. It scans for danger, it craves quick relief, and it treats uncertainty like an emergency. That's why you can know logically that you'll be okay and still feel like you're not okay. That's why you can look at a bill and immediately feel shame, even if you're already doing your best. The calmer, more focused version of you isn't a different person with a different life. It's you with a regulated nervous system, able to see options, able to wait, able to decide instead of react. So we're going to build a small, repeatable sequence you can use when the instant money anxiety shows up. It's not a meditation retreat. It's a 30 to 90-second intervention that protects your decisions. Think of it as a pause ritual you do before you engage. If you do it consistently, you'll start noticing something surprising. The anxiety becomes less controlling, not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it with immediate action. Here's your exact microscript. It's one line you say to yourself the moment the trigger hits. Nothing needs to be decided at this moment. Say it exactly like that. Short. Clean. No debate. No drama. You're not saying the situation doesn't matter. You're saying urgency is not automatically true. You're putting your hand up to the panic and telling it, gently but firmly, that it doesn't get to drive. Now let's make it real in a North American scene you've probably lived in. It's a Tuesday afternoon. You're at work, halfway through a project, Slack messages coming in, calendar packed. You've been trying to focus, and for a moment you actually are. Then your phone buzzes. It's your bank. The old version of you does the same thing every time. You grab the phone instantly, you open the alert, and your body tightens. Your mind starts running a loud internal commentary. Why did it drop? What did I forget? What else is coming out? How am I going to handle this? Then you try to fix the feeling. You transfer money between accounts without thinking it through. You open 3 tabs: banking app, credit card app, email. You stop working, but you don't actually solve anything. You're just chasing relief. Now watch the new response. The phone buzzes. You feel the jolt. You don't pretend you didn't feel it. You acknowledge it. You put the phone face down for 1 minute. And you say, quietly, nothing needs to be decided at this moment. Your shoulders are still tense, so you give your body a signal. You inhale slowly, not huge, just steady. You hold for a brief beat. You exhale longer than the inhale. You do that again. By the 3rd breath, your heart rate is a little lower. By the 4th breath, your jaw unclenches slightly. You're not magically relaxed, but you're no longer flooded. Then you choose. Not panic shoes. Choose. You decide whether you'll open the app now or later. If you open it, you do it with a specific purpose, to get one piece of information, not to spiral. You look at the transaction list like a detective, not like a judge. You're not searching for proof that you're failing. You're checking facts. And if you can't solve anything at that moment, because you're in the middle of work, you set a plan. I'll review this at 6:30 after dinner for 10 minutes. And you go back to the task in front of you, because you've told your nervous system, we are not doing emergency mode all day. That's what regulation looks like. It's not pretending the problem doesn't exist. It's refusing to treat the trigger like a fire alarm when it's actually a notification. Here's the deeper point. Money anxiety often creates a false urgency. It tells you that if you don't act now, something terrible will happen. But most money situations do not improve with frantic speed. They improve with calm attention. Calm attention catches errors. Calm attention notices patterns. Calm attention reads the due date instead of assuming the worst. Calm attention helps you send a clear message to a partner or roommate instead of a defensive one. Calm attention makes you less likely to ignore the issue for a week, which is where the real damage happens. Now, I want you to take that microscript and imagine using it with another common trigger, a message from someone. You're sitting on your couch, trying to decompress after a long day. You get a text, hey, can you send your half of the utilities tonight? Old reaction, your stomach drops, you feel accused, you type fast, either a defensive explanation or a sharp I know, or you avoid it completely and let it sit. New response, you feel the same jolt, but you don't obey it. You say, nothing needs to be decided at this moment. You take 2 slow breaths. Then you reply like the calm version of you. Maybe it's, yep, I can do that. I'll send it by 9. Or if you can't, it's, I can't tonight, but I can send it Friday. I'll confirm the exact time tomorrow. Same reality, different nervous system. Same life, different relationship. Here's your tiny action for today, and it needs to be measurable. Pick one financial trigger that reliably spikes your anxiety and commit to a 60-second delay before you engage with it. Just one trigger. It can be a bank notification, a bill email, a text about money. The rule is, when it hits, you do not open, reply, pay, or check anything for 60 seconds. You put the phone down or close the tab. You say the microscript once. Then you do 3 slow breaths. That's the whole action. To make this even more concrete, add one small boundary to your environment. Turn off previews for bank notifications so you only see notification instead of the amount on your lock screen. Or move your banking app off your home screen so you're not reflexively opening it. You're not hiding from reality, you're reducing the immediate punch that triggers flooding. You can still check your finances. You're just choosing when you do it, rather than letting the notification choose for you. Now, do a slow practice moment with me, right here, as if a trigger just hit. Imagine the buzz. Imagine the drop in your stomach. And now, say the sentence with me once, out loud if you can. Nothing needs to be decided at this moment. Say it again, a little slower, so your body can hear it. Nothing needs to be decided at this moment. Good. Now take a slow breath in. Brief hold. Long breath out. Again. And again. As you exhale, let your shoulders fall. Unclench your jaw. Let your tongue rest. It sounds small, but these physical signals are how you tell your nervous system that you are safe enough to think. One more thing before we move on. Don't turn this into perfection. You're not aiming to never feel anxious. You're aiming to change what you do next. The win is not I felt nothing. The win is I felt the spike, and I didn't let it shove me into a reaction. That's control. That's the agency. That's the beginning of emotional mastery with money. Hold on to this pause, because later, especially in that Friday night moment we'll walk through, this is the move that keeps the evening from collapsing. It's the difference between spiraling into stress and finishing your night with your dignity intact, your relationship steadier, and your sleep actually possible. Section 3. Reacting immediately to money stress trains your anxiety to get louder. The instruction here is counterintuitive but critical. Stop answering money-related triggers right away, even when you technically could. If you don't change this habit, anxiety learns that speed equals safety, and it will keep demanding faster and faster reactions from you. The stake is simple and costly. When you respond instantly, you collapse your future options. You say yes when you should pause. You agree to timelines you resent. You pay before you verify. You send messages you later wish you'd softened. Over time, this doesn't just drain money. It drains trust in yourself, because you keep proving to your own nervous system that panic gets results. This works because urgency is learned, not inherent. Most money-related inputs are not emergencies, but your brain doesn't know that unless you teach it. Every time you delay safely, even briefly, you retrain your system. You're showing it that nothing bad happens when you don't react instantly. This is how a steadier, more grounded version of you operates. Not by being reckless or avoidant, but by choosing timing instead of being hijacked by it. You need one clean sentence you can use externally this time, not just in your head. Here it is, I'm going to look at this and get back to you tomorrow. That's the whole script. It's neutral. It's respectful. It buys you space. You're not refusing. You're not escalating. You're creating time, which is the most underrated tool in emotional control. Let's walk through a familiar North American scenario. It's early evening. You're home, tired, trying to decompress. Maybe you're cooking, maybe you're scrolling, and maybe you're just sitting there staring at nothing. Your phone lights up with a message from a partner, roommate, or family member about money. Something like, "Can you send the car payment tonight?" Or, "Did you cover the subscription renewal?" Old pattern, your body reacts first. Your chest tightens. You feel accused, even if the message is neutral. You type while emotional. You explain too much. Or you snap back. Or you avoid replying because you don't want to deal with it, which creates tension later. Now watch the new response. You feel the same initial jolt. That part hasn't disappeared yet. But instead of obeying it, you pause. You remind yourself that urgency is not the same as importance. You take one slow breath. Then you send the script exactly as written. I'm going to look at this and get back to you tomorrow. No emojis. No apology spiral. No justification. Just clarity. You put the phone down. What happens next is important. The world doesn't end. The relationship doesn't collapse. Most of the time, the other person is relieved because they know when they'll hear back. And even if they're mildly annoyed, you've still protected something more important, your ability to think clearly before you act. Later, when you do look at the numbers, you're not doing it while flooded. You're doing it with intention. Here's why this matters more than it seems. Immediate responses lock you into emotional momentum. When you reply fast from anxiety, you carry that state into the next hour, sometimes the rest of the night. You stay keyed up. You replay the interaction. You second-guess your tone. You check your phone repeatedly. By delaying, you break that momentum. You contain the stress instead of letting it spread. Now, let's zoom out. Many people confuse responsibility with immediacy. They think being responsible means answering right away, fixing it now, and showing you care by reacting fast. But real responsibility is about quality, not speed. It's about making decisions you won't regret tomorrow. Delayed responses are not avoidance when they're intentional. They're leadership of yourself and of the situation. Your tiny action for today builds directly on this. Pick one category of money-related communication and set a reply window. Just one. For example, decide that you will not reply to non-urgent money texts after 8 p.m., or that you will always wait until the next morning before responding to shared expense questions. This isn't a rule you announce to everyone. It's a rule you keep for yourself. When the message comes in, you note it, then you wait. To make this easier, change one small setting. Turn off push notifications for texts from one group chat that often includes money talk. Or put your phone on Do Not Disturb for 1 hour in the evening. You're not disappearing. You're creating a boundary that protects your nervous system so you can show up better later. Let's do a slow practice moment together, because this is where your body needs repetition. Imagine your phone lighting up with a money-related message right now. Feel that first tightening in your chest. Don't push it away. Now, take a slow breath in. Hold for a beat. Exhale slowly. As you exhale, silently repeat, I don't need to answer this yet. Again. Breath in. Breath out. I don't need to answer this yet. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands relax. You're teaching your body that delay is safe. One more layer that's important here. Delaying responses also reduces shame. Shame thrives in urgency. It convinces you that if you don't respond immediately, you're irresponsible or failing. But when you delay intentionally, you replace shame with choice. You're no longer hiding. You're deciding. That shift alone can lower anxiety dramatically. You might notice resistance to this idea. A voice that says, but what if they think I don't care? Or, what if this makes things worse? Notice that voice. That's anxiety predicting the future to keep you in control mode. You don't have to argue with it. You just have to not obey it. Most reasonable people can tolerate a short delay. And if someone truly can't, that's information you can address later, calmly, with your full attention. This practice compounds. The first few times you delay, it might feel uncomfortable. That's normal. Your system is used to urgency. But after a week of doing this, something shifts. The spike is smaller. The urge to respond immediately weakens. You start trusting yourself more because you see that waiting leads to better outcomes. Conversations are calmer. Decisions are cleaner. Even when the answer is, I can't do that, it lands better because it comes from steadiness instead of defensiveness. Don't aim to delay everything. That turns into avoidance. Aim to delay strategically. Money triggers that provoke emotion are the ones that benefit most from space. That space is where wisdom lives. That space is where you remember your values. That space is where you stop confusing pressure with priority. Keep this tool close. When we move forward, you'll see how this delay pairs with the body-calming pause you already learned. Together, they form a powerful sequence: calm first, then delay, then decide. And when we later drop you into that high-pressure Friday night moment, this is the exact move that prevents a spiral and keeps you in control of your evening instead of at war with it. Section 4. Avoidance feels like relief, but it quietly multiplies anxiety. The instruction in this section is direct. You're going to look at uncomfortable financial information on purpose, in a controlled way, instead of waiting until it explodes into your life. If you never change this habit, avoidance will keep teaching your brain that money is dangerous, and every future interaction will feel heavier than the last. Here's what's really at stake. When you avoid numbers, you don't actually avoid stress, you postpone it with interest. Bills don't disappear. Balances don't magically improve. What grows instead is uncertainty. And uncertainty is rocket fuel for anxiety. It fills the gaps with worst-case stories. It convinces you things are worse than they are. It keeps you tense all day because part of you knows there's something you're not facing. Over time, avoidance trains you to distrust yourself. You start believing, "I can't handle this," even when the reality is that you've just never looked at it calmly. This works because anxiety feeds on the unknown. The human nervous system is far more distressed by vague threat than by clear, bounded difficulty. When you don't know the number, your mind invents one. When you haven't checked the account, your body assumes disaster. But when you look, slowly, deliberately, without trying to fix anything yet, you turn a monster into information. And information, even bad information, is something the calmer version of you can work with. There's an identity shift here that matters. A regulated, focused version of you doesn't avoid reality and doesn't attack themselves for it either. They face facts without judgment. They don't confuse seeing with solving. They understand that clarity comes before change. You'll need one sentence for this section, and it's internal again. Say this when you're about to look at something you've been avoiding: "I'm only here to observe, not to fix." That line matters because fixing mode brings pressure. Observing mode brings steadiness. You're giving your nervous system a promise that you won't overwhelm it. Let's walk through a concrete, everyday scene. It's a Sunday afternoon. You know you should check your credit card balance because you've been using it more than usual. Old pattern, you procrastinate all day. You feel a dull tension in your chest. You distract yourself. Maybe you clean something. Maybe you scroll. As evening gets closer, the anxiety grows because now there's also guilt. Finally, you check late at night, when you're tired, and the number feels even heavier. You either spiral or shove it away again. Now imagine the new approach. You choose a specific time earlier in the day, say 3 p.m. You tell yourself you're not fixing anything today. You sit down somewhere neutral, not in bed, not half asleep. You take one slow breath. You say the line, "I'm only here to observe, not to fix." Then you open the app. You look at the balance. You scroll the transactions slowly. You notice facts. That's it. You don't move money. You don't plan. You don't judge yourself. You close the app after 5 or 10 minutes. What happens next is subtle but powerful. Your body realizes that looking does not equal danger. You didn't implode. You didn't have to solve everything. The anxiety spike rises, then falls. That teaches your nervous system something new: awareness is survivable. Over time, that lesson reduces the intensity of future spikes. This is where many people sabotage themselves. They say, "If I'm going to look, I might as well fix it." But fixing requires energy, time, and emotional bandwidth. When you mix observing with fixing, you overwhelm yourself and reinforce the belief that looking is exhausting. Separating the two creates safety. You're building tolerance first, not perfection. Now let's layer in another common situation. You receive an email labeled statement available. Old reaction, delete, archive, or mark unread. You feel a flash of shame. You promise you'll handle it later. New response, you schedule a brief check. 10 minutes. That's it. You open the statement. You scan for totals. You close it. You remind yourself that you're not required to act today. You're required to know. That alone lowers background anxiety more than you expect. Your tiny action for today is specific and bounded. Choose one avoided financial item and set a timer for 10 minutes to look at it, no more, no less. One account. One statement. One bill. When the timer ends, you stop, even if you want to keep going. Especially if you want to keep going. You're training restraint as much as courage. To support this, create a simple ritual. Sit in the same chair. Use the same time of day. Put your phone on silent. Take one breath before you begin and one breath when you end. Rituals signal safety to the nervous system. They say, this is contained. This will end. Let's do a slow practice moment now, because your body needs rehearsal. Imagine you're about to open something you've been avoiding. Notice the tightness. Don't label it as bad. Take a slow breath in. Hold briefly. Exhale longer. Say the sentence quietly, I'm only here to observe, not to fix. Feel how that takes pressure off your chest. Take another breath. You're not bracing for impact. You're witnessing information. One more important point. Avoidance often comes with self-talk that sounds like motivation but is actually punishment. Thoughts like, I should have handled this already, or I'm so bad at this. That voice doesn't help. It just makes your body tense, which makes avoidance stronger. When those thoughts appear, don't fight them. Label them as noise and return to observation. Facts over stories. Numbers over narratives. This practice also protects your relationships. When you stop avoiding, you stop surprising people. You're less likely to say, I didn't realize, because you did realize, you just hadn't decided yet. That steadiness builds trust, not because you're perfect, but because you're present. Expect discomfort at first. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means your system is learning something new. The goal isn't to feel calm immediately. The goal is to feel capable. Calm grows from repeated capability. As this becomes easier, you'll notice a shift. Money stops feeling like a shadow that follows you everywhere. It becomes something you engage with intentionally, then set down. That frees mental space. Focus improves. Sleep improves. Conversations feel less loaded. Not because the numbers changed overnight, but because your relationship to them did. Keep this tool ready. In the next section, you'll see how observation without fixing pairs with delayed responses and body regulation to create a clear, repeatable decision process. And later, when we put you into that Friday night pressure moment, this is the skill that keeps you from either exploding or disappearing. Section 5. Trying to solve everything at once is another form of panic. The instruction here is subtle but powerful. You're going to stop turning money moments into global judgments about your life. If you don't change this, every small financial issue will keep feeling like proof that everything is wrong, and that mental weight will drain your energy far faster than the numbers themselves. Here's the stake. When your mind treats one bill, one balance, or one mistake as a verdict on your entire future, you don't just feel stressed, you feel doomed. That feeling pushes you toward extremes. You either overcorrect, trying to fix everything immediately, or you shut down because the problem feels too big to face. Both responses steal your focus, strain your relationships, and keep you stuck in cycles of anxiety instead of progress. This works because your brain is constantly trying to simplify reality. Under stress, it loves sweeping conclusions. I'm behind. I'm bad with money. I'll never catch up. These statements feel true at the moment, but they're not actually accurate. They're emotional shortcuts. A calmer, More focused version of you doesn't deny problems, but they refuse to turn apart into the whole. They handle what's in front of them without dragging their entire identity into it. There's a Stoic idea that fits perfectly here. In his letters, Seneca warns against adding imagined suffering to real difficulty. The difficulty might be a tight month. The added suffering is telling yourself it means you're failing at life. We're not eliminating difficulty. We're removing the unnecessary suffering layered on top. You'll need one exact sentence for this section, and it's one you'll use internally when your mind starts spiraling. Here it is. This is one situation, not my whole life. Say it exactly like that. Not aggressively. Not sarcastically. Just factual. You're correcting an overgeneralization before it runs away with your mood. Let's ground this in a familiar North American scene. It's the end of the month. You log into your account and see that after everything clears, you'll have less cushion than you hoped. Old pattern, your mind jumps straight to conclusions. You think about next month, then the month after that. You imagine emergencies. You start criticizing past decisions. You feel embarrassed, even though no one else is in the room. That single number becomes a story about who you are and where you're headed. Now watch the new response. You see the same number. Your body reacts, because that part hasn't been trained yet. But then you intervene. You say, "This is one situation, not my whole life." You let the sentence land. You look back at the screen and ask a narrower question: what does this actually require right now? Maybe the answer is nothing today. Maybe it's adjusting one small expense next week. Maybe it's planning a conversation. The key difference is that you're dealing with a situation, not defending your identity. This shift matters more than it seems. When you stop globalizing, problems shrink to their actual size. And problems that are their actual size are manageable. They don't hijack your whole day. They don't poison unrelated moments. You can think about money for 10 minutes and then move on, instead of carrying it like a weight in your chest for hours. Here's another example, this time involving a mistake. You realize you missed a due date and incurred a late fee. Old reaction, immediate self-attack. I always mess this up. I'm so irresponsible. That shame lingers. It makes you dread checking accounts in the future, which ironically increases the chances of missing something again. New response, you notice the mistake, feel the discomfort, and say, "This is one situation, not my whole life." You deal with the fee. You note what would prevent it next time. And then you stop punishing yourself. You treat it as data, not a moral failing. This is how learning actually happens. Shame blocks learning. Specificity enables it. When you keep things specific, you can improve. When you globalize, you freeze. Your tiny action for today is simple but precise. Pick one recurring money thought that sounds global and rewrite it into something narrow. For example, change "I'm terrible with money" into "this month is tight because of X." Or change "I'll never get ahead" into "I need a clearer plan for this one expense." You don't need to believe the new sentence emotionally yet. You just need to say it when the old one appears. To reinforce this, choose one moment today when you'll intentionally stop the spiral. When you catch your mind jumping from one issue to everything, pause and name the specific issue out loud or in writing. Specific beats are dramatic every time. Let's do a slow practice moment together, because this habit lives in the body as much as the mind. Bring to mind a recent money situation that triggered stress. Notice how your chest feels. Notice the urge to jump ahead in time or judge yourself. Now take a slow breath in. Brief hold. Long breath out. As you exhale, say the sentence quietly: "This is one situation, not my whole life." Say it again, slower. Feel how it pulls you back into the present instead of the imagined future. There's another layer here that's important. Globalizing problems often turns into comparing yourself to others. You see someone online traveling, buying, upgrading. Your mind uses that image as evidence that you're behind. But comparison is just another form of global thinking. You're comparing your internal stress to someone else's external highlight. It adds nothing useful and multiplies anxiety. When that happens, come back to the sentence. One situation. One set of numbers. One decision at a time. This practice also changes how you talk to others. When you stop globalizing internally, your external communication gets cleaner. Instead of vague stress or defensiveness, you can say things like, "This month is tighter than I expected, so I need to adjust X." People can respond to that. They can't respond to "everything is a mess." Clarity invites support. Vagueness invites more stress. Expect resistance here too. Part of you might think that globalizing keeps you motivated, that if you scare yourself enough, you'll finally fix everything. But fear-based motivation burns hot and fast. It leads to bursts of action followed by exhaustion and avoidance. Calm specificity creates steady progress. It's less dramatic, but far more sustainable. Over time, this habit rewires how money shows up in your life. Instead of a constant background threat, it becomes a series of contained situations. Some are easy. Some are uncomfortable. All finite. That alone frees mental bandwidth you didn't realize you were losing. Keep this tool alongside the others. Calming your body, delaying responses, observing without fixing, and now refusing to globalize, these are not separate tricks. They stack. They reinforce each other. And when we eventually drop you into that high-pressure Friday night moment, this is the mindset that prevents one notification from turning into a night-long spiral. Section 6. Money anxiety often tricks you into thinking the problem is the number in front of you. The real problem is usually that you're trying to solve things at the worst possible time. The instruction in this section is clear. You're going to separate when you look from when you decide. If you don't change this, every encounter with money will feel like a forced exam you didn't prepare for, and your nervous system will keep bracing for impact. Here's the stake. When looking and deciding happen at the same time, pressure skyrockets. You feel cornered. You rush. You agree to things you haven't thought through. Or you freeze and do nothing because deciding feels overwhelming. Either way, you leave the interaction with less trust in yourself. Over time, that erodes confidence and makes future money moments even harder. This works because your brain needs sequencing. Clarity comes before commitment. When you blur those steps, your body interprets the situation as dangerous. I have to act right now and I don't know the right answer. That's a recipe for panic. A calmer, more focused version of you understands that most decisions improve with distance. Not distance from reality, but distance from the initial emotional spike. There's an identity shift here that matters. A regulated version of you does not decide under duress. They collect information first, then decide later, on purpose. That's not procrastination. That's leadership over your own life. You'll need one exact sentence you can use both internally and externally. Here it is. I'll decide after I've had time to review this. Say it exactly like that. It sets a boundary without defensiveness. It buys you time without avoiding responsibility. And it trains your nervous system that decisions are events you schedule, not reflexes you obey. Let's ground this in a familiar situation. It's a weekday evening. You finally sit down after a long day. You open your email and see a message about a charge you weren't expecting. Old pattern. You feel the surge, you open multiple apps at once, and you start moving money around, maybe even disputing something before you understand it. You're trying to get rid of the discomfort, not make a good decision. By the end, you are drained, irritated, and not even sure you helped the situation. Now watch the new response. You see the email. You feel the reaction. You don't deny it. You say, "I'll decide after I've had time to review this." You don't open every app. You pick one source of information. You read the email slowly. You note what you actually need to know. Then you stop. You decide when you'll come back to make a decision, tomorrow morning, or Saturday afternoon, or during a planned money check-in. You close the laptop. The problem hasn't vanished, but it's no longer pressing on your chest. It has a container. This container is everything. When decisions have a time and place, they stop haunting you. Your mind doesn't need to keep replaying the issue because it trusts that you'll handle it later. That trust reduces background anxiety more than any quick fix ever will. Here's another everyday example. You're talking with a partner or family member about money. They ask a question that requires a decision. Should we put this on the card? Old response, you feel put on the spot. You answer quickly either yes or no, just to end the discomfort. Later, you regret it. New response, you pause and say, calmly, I'll decide after I've had time to review this. You're not rejecting the conversation. You're structuring it. You're saying, this matters enough to think about properly. This also changes how people treat you. When you model thoughtful timing, others learn not to rush you. They sense that decisions with you are deliberate, not chaotic. That builds respect, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Your tiny action for today is specific. Choose one financial decision you've been circling in your head and assign it a decision time. Put it on your calendar. 15 or 20 minutes is enough. When the thought pops up outside that window, remind yourself, I've already scheduled this. Then return to what you were doing. You're teaching your mind that rumination is unnecessary because there's a plan. To support this, create a simple rule for yourself: no money decisions after a certain hour. For many people, that's after 8 or 9 p.m. Fatigue lowers judgment. Anxiety rises at night. Deciding then almost always leads to regret. You're not avoiding responsibility by waiting, you're protecting quality. Now let's do a slow practice moment together. Imagine a decision you've been putting off. Feel the urge to resolve it right now. Instead, take a slow breath in. Hold briefly. Long breath out. As you exhale, say, I don't decide when I'm flooded. Again. Breath in. Breath out. I can't decide when I'm flooded. Notice how that creates space. Notice how your shoulders drop just a little. There's another important piece here. Many people think constant decision-making equals control. In reality, it's often the opposite. True control comes from choosing when to decide. When you separate observation, regulation, and decision, you regain authorship. You stop being pushed around by alerts, messages, and internal pressure. You might notice a fear underneath this practice. What if waiting makes things worse? That fear comes from past experiences where avoidance caused problems. But this is not avoidance. This is intentional delay with a return point. You're not saying never. You're saying later, on purpose. That distinction matters deeply to your nervous system. Over time, this changes your relationship with money entirely. Money stops feeling like a series of ambushes. It becomes a set of decisions you schedule, approach calmly, and complete. That predictability reduces anxiety even when the numbers are tight. You feel less at the mercy of circumstances and more in partnership with yourself. This practice also protects your energy. Decision fatigue is real. When you constantly decide, you exhaust yourself. By batching decisions into intentional windows, you conserve mental resources for work, relationships, and rest. You stop carrying unfinished choices in your head all day. Expect some discomfort as you implement this. The urge to just decide now may feel strong. That's old conditioning. Let it pass. Each time you delay intentionally, you weaken that conditioning. Each time you follow through at the scheduled time, you build trust with yourself. So hold this rule close. Look first, calm your body, delay your response, observe without fixing, refuse to globalize, and now, decide only when you've chosen the moment. These are not abstract ideas. They're a sequence. And when we later place you back into that Friday night pressure situation, this is the step that keeps you from making a tired, emotional decision that costs you peace the next day. Section 7. Money anxiety doesn't just come from numbers. It often comes from the conversations you're afraid to have. The instruction in this section is straightforward but uncomfortable. you're going to practice setting clean, calm boundaries around money instead of hinting, avoiding, or over-explaining. If you don't change this, you'll keep paying an invisible tax, resentment, confusion, and ongoing stress that has nothing to do with the actual amount. Here's the stake. When boundaries are unclear, money conversations drag on. You replay them in your head. You worry about how you came across. You say yes when you mean maybe, and maybe when you mean no. Over time, that erodes trust, both other people's trust in you and your trust in yourself. Anxiety grows not because you're irresponsible, but because nothing ever feels settled. This works because anxiety thrives in ambiguity. When expectations are fuzzy, your nervous system stays on alert. It keeps scanning for the next demand, the next awkward message, the next situation where you might be put on the spot. A calmer, more focused version of you understands that clarity reduces emotional load. Clear boundaries are not confrontational. They're stabilizing. There's an important identity shift here. Someone with emotional control doesn't wait until they're overwhelmed to speak. They don't explode or disappear. They communicate early, simply, and without drama. They treat money conversations like logistics, not like moral evaluations of themselves or others. You'll need one exact microscript you can use with other people. This one matters a lot, so don't improvise it yet. Use it as written, I can't do that, but I can do this. That's the sentence. It's balanced. It acknowledges the request without agreeing to it. It offers an alternative without apologizing for existing. And it keeps the conversation grounded in specifics. Let's put this into a concrete, everyday North American situation. You're sharing expenses with someone, maybe a partner, a roommate, or a family member. They ask you to cover something unexpected. Old pattern, you feel the spike. You worry about disappointing them. You start explaining your entire financial situation. Or you agree even though you know it will stress you out later. Or you avoid responding, which creates tension and makes the eventual conversation worse. Now watch the new response. You feel the same initial discomfort. That doesn't vanish overnight. But instead of spiraling, you pause. You regulate your body the way you learned earlier. Then you send one clean message, I can't do that, but I can do this. Maybe it's, I can't cover that this month, but I can help next month. Or, I can't pay the full amount, but I can send half by Friday. You're not defending yourself. You're stating reality. Notice what changes. The conversation becomes solvable. There's something concrete to respond to. Even if the other person is disappointed, the exchange is shorter and clearer. You don't spend the rest of the night replaying it, because you didn't betray yourself. That alone lowers anxiety more than saying yes ever could. Here's another example, this time at work. A colleague asks you to front money for something or take on an expense-related responsibility outside your role. Old reaction, you feel pressure to be agreeable. You worry about looking difficult. You say yes quickly, then resent it. New response, you pause, then say, I can't do that, but I can help in this other way. Maybe that means pointing them to the right department or offering time instead of money. You stay professional without sacrificing your boundaries. This is why boundaries are calming. They end negotiations. They replace open-ended pressure with clear parameters. Your nervous system relaxes because it knows where the line is. Your tiny action for today is specific. Identify one money boundary you've been avoiding and write a one-sentence response using the script. You don't have to send it yet. Just write it. For example, I can't lend money right now, but I can help you look at other options. Or, I can't commit to that monthly amount, but I can review it again in 3 months. The goal is clarity, not perfection. To support this, remove unnecessary qualifiers from your language. Notice how often you say I'm sorry when you're not actually apologizing for harm. You don't need to apologize for having limits. Limits are not failures. They're information. Now let's do a slow practice moment, because boundaries are hard on the body. Bring to mind a recent money conversation that made you tense. Feel where that tension lives, maybe in your chest or stomach. Take a slow breath in. Hold briefly. Long breath out. As you exhale, say the sentence quietly, I can't do that, but I can do this. Say it again, slower. Notice how it feels to state a limit without hostility or collapse. There's often a fear underneath this practice. What if they're upset? That fear is understandable. But avoiding boundaries doesn't prevent upset, it just postpones it and adds resentment. Clear boundaries create short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term calm. And most people, even if they don't love your answer, adjust more quickly than you expect. Another important point, boundaries are not negotiations with your anxiety. If you explain too much, you reopen the door to pressure. Over-explaining invites debate. Clean statements close loops. You can be kind without being porous. As you practice this, you might notice guilt surfacing. Guilt often appears when you stop overgiving. Let it be there without obeying it. Guilt is just a signal that you're changing a pattern, not that you're doing something wrong. Over time, this practice changes how money feels in your relationships. Conversations become shorter. Expectations become clearer. You stop dreading certain interactions. And because you're no longer constantly managing other people's reactions, you have more energy to manage your own finances calmly. This boundary work also stacks with everything you've learned so far. You calm your body. You delay your response. You observe without fixing. You refuse to globalize. You decide at the right time. And now, you communicate cleanly. Each step reduces friction. Each step lowers anxiety. Keep this tool ready. When we reach the high-pressure Friday night situation later, this is the sentence that prevents a small request from turning into an emotional blow-up or a night of silent resentment. It's not dramatic. It's not aggressive. It's just clear. And clarity, especially around money, is one of the most underrated forms of emotional control. Section 8. Money anxiety doesn't just spike in the moment. It lingers because your mind keeps revisiting the same worries over and over. The instruction in this section is essential. You're going to stop rehearsing money problems all day and give them a clear, limited container. If you don't change this, your anxiety will keep pretending it's helping by thinking things through, when it's actually draining your focus and stealing your peace. Here's the stake. When money thoughts run freely, they follow you everywhere. You're brushing your teeth and thinking about balances. You're trying to work and replaying a conversation. You're watching something at night, but half your attention is still stuck on a bill due next week. That constant background noise exhausts you. It keeps your nervous system activated even when nothing new is happening. Over time, you feel permanently behind, even on days when nothing actually goes wrong. This works because the mind needs boundaries just as much as the body does. Rumination feels productive, but it rarely produces solutions. It produces tension. When you don't give your brain a designated time to think about money, it tries to think about money all the time. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't suppress thoughts, they schedule them. They decide when worry is allowed and when it's not. There's an important identity shift here. Someone with emotional control doesn't live in constant mental rehearsal. They trust themselves enough to say, I'll handle this later, and then return to the present. That trust is what frees attention. You'll need one exact sentence for this section, and you'll say it internally when money thoughts pop up outside their container. Here it is, this has a time, and now is not it. Say it gently, not like you're scolding yourself. You're reminding your mind that there's a plan. Let's ground this in a familiar scene. It's mid-morning. You're trying to focus on work. An image flashes through your mind, an upcoming payment. Old pattern, you follow the thought. You start calculating. You imagine scenarios. 10 minutes later, you haven't solved anything, but you're tense and distracted. New response, the thought appears, and instead of engaging, you say, this has a time, and now is not it. You redirect your attention back to the task. The thought may come back again. You repeat the sentence. Over time, the mind learns that it doesn't need to shout to be heard. Now here's the key: this only works if you actually give money thoughts in a real container. Avoidance won't cut it. You're going to create a short, predictable money window. This is a specific time, once or twice a week, where you look at finances on purpose. 15 to 30 minutes is enough. During that window, you're allowed to think, plan, decide, and problem solve. Outside that window, you practice letting go. Think of how this changes your evenings. You're sitting on the couch, trying to relax. A money thought pops up. Old reaction: you grab your phone just to check, which turns into a spiral. New response: you remind yourself that you've already scheduled a money window for Saturday morning. You say, this has a time, and now is not it. You stay present. The urge passes faster than you expect because your mind trusts that it won't be ignored forever. Here's another everyday example. You're lying in bed at night, and money thoughts start racing. This is one of the worst times to think about finances. Your body is tired. Your perspective is narrow. Old pattern: you toss and turn, replaying worries. New response: you acknowledge the thoughts, then gently redirect. You say the sentence. You focus on your breathing. You remind yourself that no good decisions are made at midnight. Sleep becomes possible again. Your tiny action for today is concrete. Choose a recurring money window and put it on your calendar. Pick a time when you're relatively rested and not rushed. Treat it like an appointment with yourself. During that window, you give money your full attention. Outside of it, you practice containment. Even if you only manage this half the time at first, it will still reduce anxiety significantly. To support this, make your money window structured. Start with 1 minute of breathing to settle your body. Then look at information. Then decide or plan one small thing. End by writing down the next step and closing everything. This ending matters. It tells your mind the loop is closed, for now. Let's do a slow practice moment together. Imagine a money thought interrupting you right now. Notice the urge to follow it. Instead, take a slow breath in. Brief hold. Long breath out. As you exhale, say, this has a time, and now is not it. Again. Breath in. Breath out. Let your attention return to where you are. You're training mental flexibility, not suppression. There's an important warning here. Don't turn the money window into a punishment session where you criticize yourself. That defeats the purpose. The container is meant to make thinking safer, not harsher. If you notice self-attack, bring it back to facts and next steps. You're there to manage, not to shame. This practice also improves your relationships. When you're not mentally preoccupied all day, you're more present with people. You listen better. You're less irritable. You stop snapping over small things because your nervous system isn't overloaded with unfinished loops. Expect pushback from your mind. It may insist that worrying constantly is responsible. It's not. It's exhausting. Responsibility looks like focused attention in the right window, followed by rest. That rhythm is what sustainable adults use, whether they realize it or not. As this becomes a habit, you'll notice something subtle but powerful. Money stops feeling like a constant companion. It becomes something you visit intentionally, then leave. That separation restores your sense of autonomy. You're no longer being dragged around by thoughts, you're choosing when to engage. This skill ties everything together. You calm your body. You delay responses. You observe without fixing. You refuse to globalize. You decide at the right time. You set boundaries with others. And now, you set boundaries with your own mind. That's emotional control at a deep level. Hold on to this container. When we step into the longer story next, this is what allows you to enjoy an evening instead of mentally rehearsing financial stress. It's the quiet skill that makes all the others usable in real life. Section 9. It's Friday night, the end of a long week, and you're finally home. Shoes off. Lights low. You're looking forward to a quiet evening, maybe takeout, maybe a show, maybe just doing nothing for once. Your body is tired in that deep way that only comes after 5 straight days of holding it together. Then your phone buzzes. It's a notification from your bank. Not dramatic. Just informational. But the moment you see it, that familiar surge hits. Your chest tightens. Your shoulders rise. Your mind starts racing ahead of itself. How much is left? What else is coming out? Did you forget something? The calm of the evening wobbles. This is the exact moment that used to derail everything. Old version of you would grab the phone immediately. You'd open the app, scroll fast, feel worse, and then either start moving money around or sink into avoidance. The night would be gone before it really started. You'd be physically present but mentally somewhere else, replaying numbers while a show played in the background. Tonight, something different happens. You feel the jolt, but you don't obey it. You remember the first move. You don't decide anything yet. You put the phone face down on the table. You take a slow breath in. Brief hold. Long breath out. Another breath. As your shoulders drop, you say the sentence you've practiced, nothing needs to be decided in this moment. You're not convincing yourself everything is fine. You're just interrupting the reflex. The urge to check is still there, but it's quieter now. Manageable. You sit back and notice something important. You're tired. This is not the time to decide anything. You remember the rule you set for yourself, no money decisions late at night. You're allowed to look later, during your money window, when your head is clearer. That thought alone takes some pressure off your chest. A few minutes later, another buzz. This time it's a text from someone close to you. A shared expense. A simple question that still lands heavily. Hey, did you send your part yet? You feel the second spike. Different trigger, same body reaction. Your fingers hover over the keyboard. The old script starts whispering. Explain everything. Apologize. Or avoid it until tomorrow and feel guilty all night. You pause again. One breath in. One breath out. You don't rush. You don't overthink. You use the sentence you practiced for conversations like this: I'm going to look at this and get back to you tomorrow. You send it. No extra explanation. No defensive tone. Just clear timing. You put the phone down. For a moment, there's discomfort. That's new. You're used to either fixing things immediately or carrying the anxiety all night. Sitting in between feels strange. But it's not unbearable. It passes faster than you expected. You order food. You actually taste it. You start a show and realize you're following the plot instead of replaying numbers in your head. The anxiety hasn't vanished, but it's no longer running the evening. Later, as you're brushing your teeth, a money thought pops up again. It tries to pull you back into planning and worrying. You notice it and say quietly to yourself, this has a time, and now is not it. You remind yourself that you've already scheduled a money window for the morning. The thought loosens its grip. You go to bed. The next day, you sit down during that planned window. You're rested. You're not rushed. You open the app calmly. You remind yourself, I'm only here to observe, not to fix. You look at the balance. It's not ideal, but it's not catastrophic either. Seeing it in daylight, with a regulated body, changes everything. You notice one charge you forgot about. Instead of spiraling, you keep it specific. This is one situation, not my whole life. You jot down one small adjustment for next week. Nothing dramatic. Just one clean step. Then you reply to the message from last night. This time, you're steady. If you can pay, you do. If you can't, you say so clearly, I can't do that today, but I can send it on Tuesday. The conversation stays calm. No tension. No over-explaining. No resentment. What's different isn't the numbers. It's you. You didn't let the first trigger hijack your body. You didn't let urgency force a decision. You didn't avoid, explode, or collapse. You created space. You contained the problem. You handled it when you were actually able to think. And because of that, your Friday night stayed intact. This is what emotional control with money looks like in real life. Not perfection. Not constant calm. But pauses. Boundaries. Timing. Small sentences that protect your nervous system. Tiny choices that prevent spirals before they start. Nothing dramatic happened. And that's the point. You didn't lose sleep. You didn't damage a relationship. You didn't wake up with regret. You handled reality without letting it take over your nervous system. That's the win. Section 10. This episode was really about one thing: learning how to respond to money stress instead of reacting to it. Reacting is fast, emotional, and draining. Responding is slower, intentional, and stabilizing. When you change that pattern, money stops feeling like a constant emergency and starts feeling like something you can actually handle. We began by naming the real problem, not the numbers themselves, but the way your body panics before your mind can think. Then you learned how to calm your nervous system first, so anxiety doesn't get to make decisions for you. Next, you practice delaying responses instead of answering every money trigger immediately, giving yourself time and space to think. After that, you learned how to look directly at uncomfortable financial information without trying to fix everything at once, turning fear into facts. Then we worked on stopping the habit of turning one situation into a judgment about your entire life, keeping problems specific and manageable. From there, you separated when you look from when you decide, so choices happen on purpose instead of under pressure. You practiced setting clean boundaries with other people around money, using clear sentences instead of guilt, avoidance, or over-explaining. And finally, you learned how to contain money thoughts by giving them a proper time and place, so they don't follow you through every moment of your day. All of that came together in that Friday night moment. A notification appeared. A message landed. The old spiral almost took over, but it didn't. You paused. You breathed. You delayed. You contained. You responded later, calmly. And because of that, you kept your evening, your relationships, and your sleep intact. Nothing magical happened. What changed was the sequence. And sequence is everything. Now let's lock this in with exactly 3 do-today steps. First, today, pick one money trigger that reliably spikes your anxiety and commit to a 60-second pause before you engage with it. 1 minute. No opening apps, no replying, no paying, just breathing and letting the surge settle. Second, today, write down one clean sentence you'll use to delay a money response, like "I'm going to look at this and get back to you tomorrow," and keep it somewhere visible so you don't have to invent it under pressure. Third, today, choose a short money window, 15 to 30 minutes, and put it on your calendar. That's when you look, think, and decide. Outside that window, practice letting money thoughts pass without following them. If this lesson resonated, the next one you'll want to watch is about handling guilt and obligation, especially the kind that makes you say yes when you mean no. We'll go deeper into how emotional pressure sneaks into decisions and how to step out of it without damaging your relationships or your self-respect. If you want a whole library of Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we do here every week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.